Welcome to episode 69 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I learned so much about what I'm going to do next year from this movie.
And I am Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast. I'm just going to claim plausible deniability.
You would. You know, I mean, let's be honest here, shall we? Because this joke is too obvious not to go for. You're the black guy. You have to die first.
What? You know what? We'll get into that because there were some nice little rules that were brought up in this movie, but as far as other rules and cliches that would have been fun to get into. But first, James,
are you trying to insinuate that we're not alone here?
Yeah.
Huh. So he's listening. Yeah, we have a guest, like
Edward
always.
Snowden.
Edward Snowden is here, everyone. He's here to tell us his secrets. All right, so Paul
The
Michael
government
Anderson.
has your dick pics.
I feel bad for them. Paul Michael Anderson is here today to talk about some Behind the Mask with Leslie Vernon. How's it going, man?
Oh, I'm doing good. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for putting up with our insanity.
Nah, it's all good. It's all good.
Oh, man. So why don't you tell our listeners a bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone who's going to listen to this, and hopefully you are really impressed by the end. I'm Paul Michael Anderson. I'm a writer. I am occasionally an editor, but that hasn't been for a few years because I've been too busy writing. I'm a teacher, and I'm also a teacher's teacher. I teach other teachers how to teach writing, which is a lot of use for the use of the word teach. I have a new book that would actually, when this premieres, will be out today. It's called Standalone, which nice people like Stephen Graham Jones and Aaron Dries are saying really nice things about. And yeah, and I'm here to talk about Behind the Mask, one of the best slashers that no one's ever heard of.
Right? It's so weird how many people haven't heard of this. And like, I meet people and they either love this movie or they're like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
And then they look at like one picture of his mask and they're like, that looks stupid. And I'm just like, you don't even know. Like, you got to watch this shit, you know? But what's your book about?
What's the elevator pitch? My editor, he classified it as Cabin in the Woods meets John Wick meets Monsters, Inc. Essentially, the germination, because I'm terrible at elevator pitches, God help my agent, is essentially like all the slasher killers in the world, they do evil shit, but they have to maintain the balance of existence. Except those people who their victims are kind of tired of that. So now the killer, the stalkers become the stalked, the hunters become the hunted, across all of space and time.
Wow.
It's
right.
kind of, it's a weird, how Stephen Graham Jones say it. He called it a metaphysical slasher science fiction story, which was kind of apt. Because that's the only way I can really think of it. It's a slasher that, you know, there are some supernatural slashers and there's some really humans type slashers. This takes the supernatural slasher and gives it steroids and acid and makes it watch 2001 Space Odyssey and then start talking. And really violent.
I feel like I should log off of this and go buy it right now, damn it.
You
So
can.
everybody hit pause and go buy it right now.
And the first 350 pre-orders on the main, it's published by Perpetual Motion Machine. They did Michael David Wilson's The Girl in the Video, and Jessica McHugh's The Green Kangaroo. The first 350 pre-orders of it will get an exclusive 6-pack of trading cards of various slasher killers that are presented within the book.
Oh, that's cool.
That is really cool. The art's was done by a guy named Luke Spooner, who's done illustrations for different things I've done over the years, different anthology I've been in, and basically I had to come up with 6 killers and their backstory. And if you remember, do either of you remember the Marvel trading cards from like the early 90s?
That was not my thing. Don?
I don't remember. I remember like I had like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cards and baseball. You know and
the Dick Tracy ones.
The Marvel one. Oh God,
Dick Tracy.
I had those too. Good God, I forgot about those things.
As long as we're on this topic, I had way too many Garbage Pail Kids too. All right, go back.
But well, they're like baseball cards. Like basically, they took the killer. I gave a description. Luke Spooner came up with an amazing concept, and on the back, like you would get like bios and stats and stuff like that. So like kill count or trivia because of these are slasher killers from movies. Because one of the conceits is one of the realities that my main character exists in. All of his missions become slasher movies he can rent and watch.
Ooh.
It's weird. Like the book plates look like that you can also get when you pre-order. Look like movie rental cards because back when movie stores used to exist, and they were amazing. They send me the book plates. I'm in the middle of signing them now, and they all look like movie rental cards. You can stick in. I'm like, you guys put out all the stops for my little slasher book. Thank you guys.
That's really cool.
That is
definitely did.
I got sent them all, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is for me, you know.
Yeah, Luca, he did some of the art in my friend Doug Moreno's anthologies, so that's where I know him from. But his stuff always blows me away. Like, at least in the anthology wise, and I'm assuming with your stuff, like he's so good at taking the story, like the entire story, and putting it in one image.
Yes.
And like I stare at these pictures and I'm like, how the fuck did you tell the whole story this way? And yet if I look at it, like I couldn't decipher the story.
Yeah.
You know, like he just amazes me. Yeah.
The first time I came across Luke Spooner, I was in an anthology called Lost Signals, Perpetual Motion.
Oh, yeah.
And I was the last story in there. It's called All That You Leave Behind. And basically, it's like kind of a for some reason, I like the idea of a multiverse. But basically, it's a very personal story about, in one reality, this mother and this husband and wife lost a child, like a miscarriage. But in another reality, they had the kid. And as the story progresses, the barrier between the two realities thin to the point that everyone's kind of convinced the mom's going insane because she feels the pregnancy. Okay. It messed people up. I sent it to someone to read, and she burst into tears in a Starbucks. But Luke did the illustration for it, and I don't have my Ego shelf nearby because I'm in a guest bedroom down in the basement. My Ego shelf's upstairs. And it was a bassinet, but the way he drew the bassinet was like, it was so stark and haunting. I love his work. So to have him doing the cards was amazing.
Absolutely. No, I mean, everything I've seen from him is just great. So I can't wait to see these. So normally, this is the point where I would say, why did you pick this film? But considering that you directly said that serial killers have to do things to keep the balance in the world, and I feel like Herschel from The Walking Dead says those exact words in this movie.
Yes.
Is that the reason you picked it? Is it that part, or is there more to it than that?
Well, the germination of the book itself, I can't. If you put a gun in my head, I wouldn't be able to come up with the idea of where the book came. But I loved the idea of a serial killer, a slasher killer, being an objectively bad guy, but you still root for them. Like, Henry Portrait, the serial killer, Henry is the main character, but you don't root for the motherfucker. No. Scream, you don't root for the killer. None of the movies you actually root for, although in sequels of like Halloween and Jason and Freddy, you kind of do, and that's a whole different issue. Yeah. So when I latched onto that idea of like, okay, here's my killer. He is objectively evil, but he's still your protagonist. You still kind of end up rooting for him. How do you do that? And it bugged me because I was certain someone had come up with it. So I was like bugging people like, Max Booth III or Bracken McLeod be like, have you heard of this? This is years ago. I was like, have you heard of this? Is this real? And they're like, no. I was like, okay, I might write this. And they're like, go ahead, dork. But when I think of the closest thing that comes to it is, and when I think of like the best slashers, it's Behind the Mask. It's aware of itself and it's meta in a way that without that meta quality, the story doesn't exist. Like it doesn't exist without its self-awareness. Everyone talks about Scream's self-awareness. And I actually rewatched Scream recently because it's one of the hallmarks of the genre.
Oh yeah.
And I buy that, and I hadn't seen it in 20 years. And I was irritated with it within the first 20. After Drew Barrymore gets hung, I was already irritated. Because it is a standard slasher that just has a slight, maybe sort of awareness to itself. Whereas Behind the Mask exists as a kind of dissection of the genre. So when I thought of, okay, what's a weird kind of take on the slasher genre, that's the first thing I think of. It's Behind the Mask.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I would argue that it's probably like Psycho, where like I look at Psycho now and I'm like, who the fuck cares? But like at the time, holy shit, right?
Yeah.
And I get how it opened the doors for everything and brought us here. And I still like Psycho. I just I can't grasp that this was the most terrifying thing people had seen. So I kind of wonder if Scream's the same way, where it was the beginning of being meta. It was the beginning of we're aware of what's happening, and then things like Leslie Vernon were able to look at that and be like, you barely scratched the surface, man. Like, do this,
Possibly.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there as an option, but yeah.
No, and that's definitely possible. I was thinking of, when I thought of Scream and what you were saying, what pops immediately in my head is, remember the first, this is going out there in pop culture, I throw a lot of pop culture references. You remember the first Treehouse of Horror where they were doing the Raven?
Yes, very much.
Okay, but they come back to the end of at the end of the story, Bart is like, that wasn't scary at all. And Lisa explained to him, but back in the day, that was terrifying. Yep. And so his reply was, you mean like the first Friday the 13th? No one's scared of it now. And she was like, exactly. So maybe it was like that, possibly. I mean, I saw it in 2000. I saw it when I was in high school. And I wasn't a big slasher person. I've seen them just because when you have a video store within walking distance, you see a lot of horror movies.
Yeah.
You like horror. And I remember not being impressed. Not that it's a serviceable slasher movie, but when people talk about it, how clever it is, I'm like, it's not that clever, dude. It's a standard movie. Psycho, I think what's still shocking about that, and it's still shocking today, is they killed the main character within the first 30 minutes. Spoilers to a 50-year-old movie. But they killed Janet Leigh, who you think is the main character, up until like the first 30 minutes. And even now that doesn't really happen. And when it does, it's cause for note. It's fascinating. So I think in terms of meta, slashers are the most, I think, ripe movies to, if you want to psychologically dissect a horror movie, slashers are the ones to go with. Because you can talk about the tropes and the archetypes of various monsters, but slashers themselves, being of themselves, are guys with knives or other bladed objects, and you can feed into and dissect a ton of stuff into it.
Oh yeah.
So when you can apply a meta level to it, where literally that self-awareness and that psychology plays into the plot, then you can just have fun. And maybe it's my English teacher in me, but I'm like, cool, let's dissect shit,
No, definitely. I mean, maybe I have a lit crit background, so I tend to just do that anyway. But That's how I've always been. Like, even like way before I went to college, like I would watch movies with people and they hated watching them with me because I'd be like, yes, it was fun, but did you see blah, 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 and basically doing what we do now. And people did not appreciate it as much as our downloads say they do today.
Wait. Are you saying you broke down critically the movie Chud?
Yes. It can be done. Is that a challenge?
It can be, actually. Talking about Urban Decay.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was a typical teenage boy, so I still enjoyed Sorority House Massacre 3. But, I don't know. It's always been more to me. And I do think slashers have always been a huge part of that because there's so much fear and there's so much like we talked about this on our Halloween episode back in July where Michael Myers went on this random kill. And that's what was great about him was that it could happen to anyone, right? Mm-hmm. And slashers do that all the time. And that randomness is so much like the real world with, the random shit that happens everywhere all the time. And Go ahead.
What's interesting about that is that, and I'm glad you pointed out Halloween, is like very quickly in the genre, it became a rule that it's because of revenge or it's because of an anniversary of some kind. But you go back to the one, like Psycho and Peeping Tom are usually seen as the precursors to the slasher genre, but everyone kind of agrees Halloween is the first real slasher if you ignore Black Christmas in 1974. But if you look at it and forget all the sequels, including Part 2 made in, I think, 1982, Michael Myers has no reason. He just does it. And that is terrifying. It's like every other slasher afterwards try to come up with a reason why it exists. Jason did this. Jason's mom did this. Freddy Krueger did this. The guy from Silent Night, Deadly Night, I can't remember his goddamn name, and I have it on Blu-ray as a special edition because it's actually a really good movie. He did it for this reason. But Michael Myers had no reason to do the killing. He just did.
Yeah, and I think that's so much more like the real world. And I think that's actually why I like Michael less than I like others, because I do like there being a reason, because I watch slashers to get out of the real world and be able to make sense of the crazy shit that's happening around me. And I think that's it's one of the reasons I like Leslie Vernon so much, because there's so much thought put into why this, why here, why are we doing this, why am I... Yeah, we leave weapons everywhere, but I'm dulling them down, I don't know. I like that so much more. Yes, go ahead.
But what's interesting about that is he puts into thought, but do you notice beyond a reason kind of given halfway through by Scott Wilson's character of, what the fuck is his name in that movie? I know him as Eugene, but his name's Eugene in the movie. But beyond the kind of half reason, there is no reason for Leslie Mancuso to become Leslie Vernon. He just wants to. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that that's the one question mark that's kind of left in the movie. He gives you a reason for everything else, but he doesn't give you a reason why. And there is no reason why Taylor and her crew decided to come out. They just wanted to do it. And that in and of itself is actually incredibly terrifying if you stop to think about it. Because we talked in email about the book, or the movie, I'm sorry, I was kind of just saying, let's talk about social responsibility and Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Because there is no real reason why beyond Taylor wants to make a really famous documentary. And even then, that's not really expressed in the movie. She just shows up and starts recording them, and apparently this was an agreement that happened off camera. And I love that aspect.
I keep wondering, who actually initiated this?
I wrote that in my notes.
Did you?
I did. I was like, wait, who came to who?
Yeah, jump into that. Tell me your thoughts on that.
So, the closest I can get to is at the end of the movie, and I'm sure your listeners know we're going to be jumping all around because I guess other people do it, although...
They're very used to it.
Well, when the ones I've listened to, Sadie, for example, Sadie Hartman went chronological, and I'm like, oh my God, how can you do that? Towards the end of Leslie Vernon, when they're in the barn, he's already started his rampage. Taylor figures out the truth. She goes, "Oh my God, he found me before I even talked to him, before we even met." And it's almost like it's deliberately left ambiguous as to who contacted who. He was apparently aware of her and allowed it to happen, but it's never definitive who came to who, which, if we're talking about the responsibility of things, and there are plot holes in that movie that deal with that, it is kind of left. It's almost like the one thing dangling in front of the viewer. Like, I will tell you, here's the weapons why we use it. I will tell you, here's why we have this anchor. I will tell you, here's the process of setting up the rampage. But I'm not going to tell you why. And I love that.
Don, what do you think?
Yeah.
No, I was just enjoying listening to at least your impressions of it so far. But I enjoyed it because of the breakdown of a lot of things, and I was even just now I was questioning that whole idea of who came to who with respect to creating this documentary. And I'm just imagining, since this is in 2006, maybe there was some Craigslist ad that was out there, and that either Leslie responded to or Taylor responded to do this. But I mean, I think that mystery behind it is a good thing to have in the film, because I wouldn't necessarily categorize it as a plot hole, but it's one of those things that it does make you have questions as far as what took place, what was going on. And it even, for me, by the end of the film, it seems as though Leslie's the one who sought them out and said, "Hey, I'd like to have a documentary made. I'm this guy. Come meet me here." Because as you realize when the crew starts changing their mind about participating, they start to realize, like, no, they're the one. It's Taylor specifically is the one who's being targeted. And it's not the group that they had. So, I mean, this may have been his plan altogether from the beginning is, hey, there's this kind of nerdy art school girl or film school girl that's out there that fits the profile I need to have to make this night work. So I'll use this ruse. I thought it was very well done as far as the psychology that was brought in and the methodology to explain slasher films for people that are fans of the genre and people who aren't, because I found myself laughing at certain parts because of the way that they approach the stereotypes or the cliches that you would have in a lot of these films. Like even the part about cardio. Oh, cardio is so important. Cardio is so important because I have to be fast without looking like I'm fast. And I was like, holy shit, that is a fun way to look at this. Like I have to keep up with them, but I have to move slowly while I'm doing it because they can't see me running. Oh, and I have to pop out of the shadows and I have to move. I thought it was brilliant. And I feel bad that I missed out on this film and didn't know about it until, a couple of weeks ago.
Wow, I would have told you a long time ago. I had no idea you didn't know.
Just from the film and with it being on Shudder, I thought it had come out within the last couple of years because the quality of the filmmaking, I honestly thought it had just come out. It didn't look too aged. And what made me realize that it was an older film as opposed to looking up and seeing the release date was the inclusion of Zelda Rubinstein as the librarian. Yep.
This was her last movie.
When I saw her, I was like, it's like she's dead. And then I looked up and it was like, oh, this was like 14 years ago. It's like, all right, well, because at first I thought they got a look-alike, and then when they got up close, I was like, no, that's her. But no, I thought this was very well done with respect to paying an homage to slashers, but then also giving you a great, and I think I wrote it down as like, you get a master class in slashers. Absolutely. As far as how the killers operate.
So really fast to go back to what you were saying about the mystery of who contacted who. I am under the impression that it's not a mystery in the slightest bit.
Really?
To me, 100% she contacted Leslie Vernon. But because of the library scene where he's so careful placing things for the other girl to find, and the way that he sets everything up, he put everything in motion for her to contact him so that she would never suspect shit.
Now, where are you getting getting that she contacted him? Because it might be just because the one thing I agree with Don here is like the pieces way they lay things out is so subtle, and it's only when you see the movie and you catch the twist, and then you go back and watch it again, you see all these clues that point in the direction. Where are you getting that she contacted him? Like,
to
was
me,
it something said?
It's completely that scene in the library where he leaves the newspaper article. Because if he goes through that much work for this girl who doesn't matter because she's the red herring.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
He went through that much work for the one that he needs.
Mm.
And the only way to ensure that she was going to be there on kill night is to make it her idea.
That's that.
So I am 100% in that game.
I can get behind that. I mean, I kind of want to. I've already watched it like 3 times in the past like month, but I kind of want to watch it again now. But actually, and I say this, I was talking with my wife. We were walking the dogs this evening before the podcast, and I was saying like, Behind the Mask is one of those movies that even with like technical flaws in it, it for some reason the technical flaws actually enhance the movie more for me. Because it's almost like the flaw in Turkish rugs, you know, the deliberate flaw in a Turkish rug. It makes the goodness shine more. But we're talking about the library scene, and the one thing that twists the movie around is when Taylor and crew decide to come in and try to stop the murders because they can't let it happen. To the point that when the farmhouse killings start happening, I think it was Doug or Todd says, "Man, this is really happening."
Yes.
And they freak out then. They didn't freak out. And the one plot hole I would put in this, and it actually, again, makes me like the movie more, is that they did not have that reaction when he killed Zelda Rubinstein.
Huh.
That passed them by. They were like, "Oh shit, he's really doing this," but they don't even hesitate. They don't hesitate until Doc Holleran tells him he's not really Leslie Vernon. You know that, right? They are like, "Oh shit, Taylor looks vaguely unnerved," but there's never a hesitation of continuing to record until they discover the truth about Leslie, and then at the farmhouse and the killings start. But the very first death, Zelda Rubinstein's, they kind of just go along with it.
Interesting.
And I was kind of
totally missed that.
It's only something that occurred to me in the past like few months, and I was like, wait a minute, wait. And it's when I first started writing my at the very beginning of my career, I was in a writing group, and it's not one of those lovey-dovey writing groups. They all kind of had the attitude like, we're gonna pretend we're editors and we're gonna reject you. So it was kind of brutal. You had to have a thick skin. And the one thing I learned, and it's not original to the group, but it's where I first heard it, is this thing called refrigerator logic. It makes sense, like where you see something and it makes sense when it's happening. But then commercial break happens, you get up, go to the fridge, and you go, wait. Because you've disconnected with the presentation, you can now then kind of turn it over in your head. And Zelda Rubinstein's death is a bit of refrigerator logic that for me, because I've discovered the movie in 2008. That's where I got it. That for 12 years I've never questioned. And then I was like, wait a minute. Why didn't they have a problem with the old lady dying? Those ageists? You know.
Now I'll never have to pay my library fines. Ha 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 ha.
Maybe that was it. Paradise Lost? Found it.
You know, you mentioned Doc Halloran, and every time they say his name, I just think Dick Halloran from It.
Yes. They named it after the two Shining characters. Doc, the nickname for Danny, and Halloran, of course, for the cook, who is also in It.
There you go.
Yeah, that was deliberate on their part. There were a few things in there. What I found interesting is they went into it consciously knowing they were making an homage to slasher films as they are making a slasher, but they had things in there that weren't slasher-esque. Like Zelda Rubinstein wasn't in a slasher film. Like she was in Poltergeist.
Yeah.
Right.
They had a puzzle box, a Lamont box from Hellraiser on a table during one of the interviews. Yeah. Hellraiser's not a slasher. Doc Halloran is not a slasher. Freddy Krueger is a slasher, so getting him in, that makes sense. Getting Kane
Hodder.
Kane Hodder, thank you. Getting him in, that makes sense. But like, Are you just like it was like this might be our one shot to make a horror movie, so they're gonna go the Kevin Smith route and go fuck it, put it in.
Yeah, why not? That's what I would do. My only regret is they didn't get Tony Todd.
That would have been amazing. That would have been amazing. Tony Todd and get the guy who played the Shape in the first and the 2018 version of Halloween. Get him like pumping gas or something.
Or just have William Shatner walk by.
Yes.
Oh my God. I love that Kane Hodder's cameo has nothing to do with anything at all.
No. He's just trying. Well, no, he's in front of the house that is the house from Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yes.
Right.
But I mean, like he's not really doing anything,
No.
You take Robert Englund and you basically give him the direct opposite character,
Oh,
and, and then Kane's just there, just hanging out. But yes, I do love that Kane is at the Nightmare house. That's great.
Something else that I love about the movie is that they play nothing supernaturally. Like Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Mike Myers, even Chucky is referenced, and they're just played as regular slasher killers. Like it's an industry, not that it's actually supernatural. And I wrote in my notes, like, if they actually had made the sequel, and I know they've been trying for years, and they made a comic book, which I have not read, and I need to read it. Like, would they introduce a fucking union?
Holy shit, that would be great. Well, because Eugene talks about he's retired. So I mean, what does that entail? He's just stopped being a killer, or because he has to have something to do as far as his life. Because you see that even though he's retired, he's still going through that the isolation tank.
Yep.
Which is just coughing, but he's doing that type of stuff, and he'd been in there for 3 days. And it was hilarious that his wife just kept forgetting about him. Like, oh, yeah, he's out back.
Oh, no, that was amazing.
Yeah, he's been out there a couple hours, 3 days. Still training.
I looked him up. I looked up the trivia because whenever I love a movie, I have to read the script and I look at the trivia. And apparently, he was supposed to be, it's never explicitly said, he was supposed to be the older version of Billy, who was the killer in Black Christmas. Really? They named him Eugene. They named him after the character, but as one of those, because he was talking about quantity of jobs of just like, there's no real reason. We just get in, kill everyone, and get out. And I was like, I haven't seen Black Christmas probably in 25 years. But I was like, that's fascinating. What did you... No, there was something I wrote down, and I was like, they don't react until the killings start happening at the farmhouse, which, by the way, if you ever notice, they never show the first farmhouse killing. You don't know who those characters are. They don't show them in the setup. They don't show them at any point. They're just the people who are killed in the bed, and you never see them.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I that occurred to me last night as I was watching it. Is like, they were okay with it when they were watching it through a video camera. But when they actually were like right beside where the murders were happening, suddenly they had a problem with it. And it kind of like, it's not a found footage film, really. It's not a Blair Witch. It's not a Paranormal Activity or a Wreck or anything like that, or a Cloverfield. But it is slightly, and what always comes up in found footage films and people in general, because everything's recorded now, is this idea of reality being filtered through a screen, making it less real. And I was wondering if maybe that's the reason why the plot hole happens in the library, is that Zelda Rubinstein dies on the other side of the room, far away, where it is just they have to zoom in order to see it. Whereas Doc Halloran shooting at Leslie is much closer to them. But when they get to the farmhouse and that unseen couple is slaughtered right next to them, like there's just a curtain separating them from bloodshed, that's when it stops being a movie and starts being real. Which, ironically enough, is when the filmography of the movie becomes very cinema-like. It's no longer through screens; it's now through traditional narrative composition. And I don't know if that was deliberate or I'm just reading too much into the damn thing at this point.
No, I mean, I think that's very... It's the bringing everything into reality.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that those two go hand in hand. If it's not deliberate, it couldn't be placed any better.
I mean, I love the fact that it becoming reality is when the movie becomes the most cinematic. I mean, the first shot that's a movie shot beyond like the prologue that really has nothing to do with the movie because we come back to it like within 20 minutes. The very first shot of the movie being a movie in the third act is an overhead crane shot coming down to the van where Taylor's like, we can't just stand by and let this happen. And it's like, wait, it's become reality, but it has like the most Hollywood shot ever. And I was like, are you just taking the piss? Or are you not aware of what you're doing? Or are you trying to do something there?
I would think, based on what I've seen in this film, that was probably super intentional.
It always makes me think of like first-person stories. And the one thing I've written first-person stories, but I was trying to avoid them because I remember reading at one point, or someone told me, I think it was Nick Mamatas, actually, who wrote, like, if you read a first-person story, you know that person survived.
Right.
And found footage, even though very clearly, like Blair Witch Project, no, they just left the artifact behind. I always think, you know, if you see something found footage that's happening in your POV, you're going to survive. Although now that I'm saying that aloud, I'm like, that's not true in any of the found footage films I actually like. Like Paranormal Activity, the first one, and Blair Witch. Although Blair Witch the thirds, no, they die too. Shit.
Well, initially I thought this was going to be a found footage one where, they went out to interview this guy and, you know, shit went crazy.
Yeah.
Because the way it was being shot. But yeah, you know, changing it at that point where they're at the farmhouse does change your reaction to, well, one, it's definitely not going to be a found footage film now. It was a full on documentary to where they're playing off of this, to where now you do question, well, is she gonna get away? Well, I mean, we don't know that she's the one, but you know, like, who's gonna make it? Because Leslie even says, like, nobody gets away. So now, as a viewer, you're expecting, like, well, fuck it, I guess everybody's gonna die, except for who he wants to. But you know, that nobody gets away line comes up a couple of times, and I'm like, okay, cool. You know, maybe this is, I don't know, he would send the video off as like evidence in a trial, or you know, the video gets found and gets used in a trial, and we, you know, at the end of the film, it's him, you know, behind the defendant's table and trying to deny any of the shit that came up, and hey, Exhibit A, we've got film of every kill that you've made.
I don't know. Yeah, he does bring up the whole thing of the kill, no one gets away, which they talk about that with the paradox of having a survivor girl, which they don't call a final girl. Everyone calls a final girl now, but back then they called a survivor girl. And it was one of those times in the movie you could see them straining. The few times that you could see them straining against the rules they're imposing is, well, how do you rationalize a survivor girl when you are trying to be successful? Because as he said, this can go very early on in the killings. He's like, this can go either way. Either, you know, I could end up dead and hiding or arrested. And it's like a survivor girl kind of tilts the order one way or the other. I like the fact that, going back to what we were saying before of like, he picked her out, and it's like, it almost makes you wonder, like, did he really try to kill her? Was he really after? Like, when you pick a survivor girl, are you authentically trying to kill them? Or do you want someone to survive? And you don't get a clear answer from Leslie. Because he obviously really liked Taylor. Like, he felt close to Taylor. Especially even at the end when he says, just before the supposed quote-unquote death, is like, you were the one. And I was like, what is that? Is that, I can't figure that out now.
I think it's an issue of somebody has to tell the story, because if you have all these people that got murdered at this place, right? It's kind of like when we talked about the serial killers on a previous episode and other slash. Like, there has to be somebody to survive to tell the story of what happened, so that the community can make some sense of, and then also build off of the legend of whatever they already believed. So, you know, hey, this happened to this kid way back when. This is the story about him, blah, blah, blah. He came back, killed all the people here. And then you have this legend that gets built on top of a legend or folklore or whatever had already existed, because this one person survived and was able to tell it, as opposed to if you kill everybody there, who the hell is going to be able to say, that becomes, oh, was this a on bad? Was this an assassination? Was this like some weird satanic cult that came out and did all this stuff? I think by having that person that survives, whether it's the final girl or a guy, it becomes that thing of that person doesn't fit into the nobody gets away, because nobody gets away you could have an add-on to it, which is nobody gets away that I don't plan on allowing to live.
So you can almost argue that's the unspoken part of that statement.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, for me, at least with not just this film, but other films where somebody lives, that person has to serve as a vehicle to tell this story or tell what took place.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of like westerns where like you kill everyone, but you let one live to go tell the tale, and go back and tell them what happened here.
Or Mulan, where the two guys are running away. And this is, how many people does it take to deliver a message? Only one, sir. And
that popped in my head as soon as you said it. I was like, oh shit.
That's awesome. He's got kids.
You got kids.
Yeah.
Your references become pop culture. It becomes like fucking Nickelodeon shit, Disney.
Absolutely. That's all I do now. Jesus. I'm just like, I constantly quote Peppa Pig, and I claim to be an expert at everything. I'm like, I happen to be an expert at map reading, But no. Going back to what you were just saying, like, it's a thing that they really should have put in on this, because it's such a missed opportunity. Because most slashers did this great thing where the survivor girl or final girl is the first person killed in the sequel.
Yes.
And so what you effectively did was leave somebody to tell the tale, spread your fucking legend, and then slaughter her ass, because it's usually a her.
Yeah.
And then everyone's like, oh shit, Jason's back. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, So, yeah. That seems like a missed opportunity.
They've been trying for years to get it made, and they keep making like motions like this might happen. They made a comic book, and I need to track down the comic book because I would read the shit out of that. But it's like we called Before the Mask, and like I said, and I think they totally need to bring up a union. I think they need to have a union.
Yeah, complete with benefits and how many kills, quotas on kills that you had to have.
Are you an affiliate member or an active member? Like the
apprenticeships. There's so many things they could do with it that not only get into the slasher lore, but also get into cultural and historical aspects. Where this wasn't a sanctioned kill under the guild laws, or they fucking go on strike.
No one dies.
Everybody lives.
Who was killing? You fucking scab.
So the comic is available at vernonsfarmhouse.com, and all 6 issues are on there for the lowdown price of $10 an issue. So I probably won't be reading it anytime soon.
See, but you say that, and I'm like, I just got paid for a story. I wonder if they take PayPal.
I wonder if Paul lets people borrow his comic books. Oh, anyways.
The one thing, kind of coming back to the whole, like, everything we're kind of touching upon is Leslie's choice. Like, Leslie's directing this, almost. And he says that at one point. He's like, when Taylor kind of freaks out on him, and he's like, get the fuck out of the house. You have that look. You're going to do something look. He was like, I made a choice. And we were talking earlier about how Mike Myers was, James, you said you actually don't really particularly care for the non-reason kill. But I thought that was actually horrifying, because when he kills Todd later on, Todd's trying to make a connection with him. Like, hey, it's me, Leslie. Fuck it. Look at me. Take off the mask. Look at me. It's me. It's Todd. It's the doughboy. And Leslie doesn't fucking hesitate to kill him. He does it quickly. He doesn't make Todd suffer, but he fucking annihilates him.
Yeah.
And for someone like me, I kind of get tired of the whole this is a revenge plot. Me personally, because I just got burned out. Like for every The Burning and Sleepaway Camp and what was I watching? Miss 45, which is actually a good one, and it's used as a gun, so not technically a slasher. I like. So for me, the most horrifying shit is the random horror, the one that really has no reason, which is kind of nihilistic. But he says it in the most calm, charming way possible. I made a choice. You chose journalism. And it's like it's the most charming way to point out that, like, I, at the end of the day, don't give a fuck. I'm going to kill you. And I thought that was, and when I think about it after the fact, it's actually incredibly unnerving to me.
See, I agree with all of that. What I mean by it is I want to know something about the character that's dying.
Yeah.
And Michael will just like randomly grab somebody and stab him. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Some old bitch I've never seen before. Why do I care? So when I say random, I don't necessarily mean that I don't want it to be random to him, but I want to know something about the character so that I give a shit when they die. Not to make this commercial for my book real fast, but I actually point that out. This entire podcast is a commercial for your book.
Thank you for saying that. There's a scene early on, because like I said, main character is a slasher killer. He jumps into a dimension, a version of Earth, and he becomes like the urban legend. So theoretically, in one universe, he is Jason, he is Leslie, he is Chucky, whatever. In the first scene we see him, he's on a job. And he's stalking, he's killing the last two people. And before he jumps out and kills them, he hears them talking, and he kind of goes, fuck. He doesn't want to know anything about them, because then he has to think about them as human, as people with pasts. And it bugs him, so he almost becomes more vicious because he's angry at the idea. And I can get behind that. Like a random body count, and which is what I have with a problem with the later sequels of the slashers of the 80s, because it becomes about the body count, not necessarily about the people you're killing, or the individuals. I'm sorry. Is like I agree with that. I want to know the humanity, but I like the fact that it doesn't matter who you are. Someone is going to come and kill you, and I like that.
That's the lesson we want everyone listening to take home today.
Of course.
Someone is coming to kill you.
That should always be the takeaway. Even Disney films, the takeaway should be, you're going to die after this.
Disney films are all about people dying. It's just they wait till you have kids.
Oh, God. Especially Pixar movies. I watched Onward, and I'm like, what the fuck? I'm crying.
Yes, very much so. That's a sad movie.
It is.
Sorry to break it from Disney, but I think Paul brings up a good point as far as with his own writing, and there's also the comparison that you can make within history itself, because it's a whole lot easier for to when we're talking about body counts, to commit genocide and all types of atrocities towards people, or turn a blind eye to it happening, if you disregard the humanity of the people that it's happening to. And a great thing about these films, and this is one of the few times I'll take up for Michael Myers, is not having any type of connection to the people that he's killing is what makes it easier for him in a slash. No, well, it's going to be easy for him anyway, but it's a lot easier for the slasher killers to do it, because I'm not looking at you as a dad or a mom or somebody who has this family with a lot of people that care about you or whatever, because there is a smidge of humanity in a lot of these killers. And if we go with serial killers, we can look at that, because even in when we were talking about Zodiac, they made time to include this one point where the presumed killer, the person they're leading you to believe is the killer, is giving this woman a ride, and she has a baby with her, and he's uncomfortable with the idea of having the baby in the car because he doesn't want to kill her and then have to kill the baby too if he was going to do that. So this whole idea of you have to dehumanize that person or that group of people in order to make it easier for you to kill them, because if I see you as more than just a bag of meat, it's going to be pretty hard for me to go through that act. Now, you do have some killers, some slashers in these movies that they don't give a shit anyway. They're still going to do it. They might hesitate, but they're still going to do it.
Yeah.
Paul, I don't know if you know this, but our guest for Zodiac was a man named Max Booth III.
He's obsessed with that fucking movie. That and what's the other one? The Miracle Mile. He loves those two movies. And I've known Max for 7 years. A lot of times, yeah. I've known Max for 7 years, and those are the two movies. If he's referencing something, it's referencing from one of those two flicks.
Well, we were talking earlier, and then we kind of got sidetracked because that's the way conversations should go. Talk about the rules that they throw down. And you had mentioned at the top of discussing like some possible rules that they forgot that are kind of become staples. And I immediately jumped in with, I like the fact that the very first slasher doesn't really have a set of rules. Halloween breaks all the rules that become kind of common later on. Jamie Lee Curtis isn't afraid to fuck around, in Halloween. She smokes, she drinks. She's not the Virginal's final girl. Of course, John Carpenter doesn't strike me as a very rules kind of guy anyway.
No.
But all the slashers that came afterwards, they have their own rules of how this all works. And I was like, okay, well, Behind the Mask exists for the rules, but what rules do you think that they should have maybe incorporated that they didn't?
I would like to see that first couple and find out that one of them was black.
I knew you were. I was like, this son of a bitch.
See, okay, you mentioned, I don't think we were recording at the time, you mentioned how much you love the reboot of Friday the 13th.
I do, yes. I've done an episode about it, so our listeners know.
Oh, God, I'll be honest with you, and you might be like, fuck it, this interview's over. I dislike the movie a lot.
No.
Mostly because the only two characters they spend any time with, and I haven't seen it since it came out because I was so irritated. The only characters they actually characterize and define and make interesting is the black character, the black kid. And he's actually cool. He's actually he's someone I could see in real life. And I don't know if he's the first one killed, but he's definitely slaughtered en masse. And someone with almost no personality and no characterization to her is left to survive. And I thought that was so irritating.
Yeah.
When I watched that movie, I almost turned it off at that point because I'm like, God damn it. The one character I liked, they killed.
Yeah, not to spoil that episode before everyone goes and downloads and listens to it, but no, that's that's where we find out that Jason is actually just a guy who really enjoys growing weed, and he gets really mad when people come and fuck with his weed field.
Apparently, Jason's weed.
Yeah.
Side note: that sounds like a Bracken McCloud story. I don't know if either of you have ever read Bracken McCloud.
Yes.
But he wrote a crime story based around that. It's in 13 Views of the Suicide Woods, and I thought it was such an interesting little crime story because it's about a bunch of weed growers, and I'm like, that's amazing. But yeah, definitely. Behind the Mask is very pale. It's not a very diverse movie.
Oh yeah. Well, and I mean, I think part of that goes to. I had the same issue with my book Fat Camp, which is a slasher, because it takes place in a little tiny town in Iowa, right? Yeah. And I've been to a little tiny town in Iowa, and making it diverse would everyone would call that shit out and be like, yeah, right. Yeah. So I kind of got that same feeling from Leslie Vernon is I don't feel like they're in a huge town.
No.
So to me, it made sense that it was really whitewashed, but I don't know.
I think it's a fictional town. Glen Echo's a fictional town. I know they filmed it in Oregon, but I think it's supposed to take place in Maryland. And I'm like, I've lived in Maryland, fam. Maryland is not that pale. Yeah. I mean, Western Maryland's kind of pale. I'm going to be honest. But I live on the Eastern Shore. Not the palest place. So they kind of ignore the POC first kill. What else did they ignore?
Gosh. Well, because that was the one that stood out to me, especially when James made his joke earlier. I can't think of it because I kept looking at all the ones that they did adhere to. And I don't know. I was just really caught up in well, I think one that would have worked as far as the slashers would have been You Do It Alone.
Yeah.
And even in the prep, which I can understand his prep, when the documentary crew is there and he says, oh, this is how I do it. I watch this person and she puts a brick out here, but I put fishing line on it. Hey, guess what? Tell you what, you pull the brick this time and I'll stand out in the bushes. And I was just thinking to myself, like, that's not necessary for you to do that, because why don't you just do it yourself?
Yeah.
Because if this were another character, if this were another slasher, I'm sorry, if this were another killer, that killer would be out there doing it they wouldn't, I don't know. And I almost feel like almost with magicians, like, why are you telling all of your secrets?
Yeah.
See, and I took that as getting her super comfortable. And, her guard is completely down because she's excited by everything they're doing. Mm-hmm. Because she's getting to see the behind the scenes and she's getting to partake in stupid little shit that doesn't matter. If she fucks this up, it doesn't really matter. The other girl still sees him.
Right.
And you lose one jump scare for her. So he loses nothing if she messes this up. But he gains a lot by getting her trust, getting her totally into this. Plus, he's basically setting her up to make her believe that come kill night, she can be involved in things and she can get these behind the scenes shots and everything else that she thinks she's doing. So I don't know. That's me.
No, I mean, that's completely fair. I love the fact, and I said this earlier, it's like when you see the twist and then you watch the movie again, you see all these little cues that they make when they realize, oh, like when he's really talking about her. Like the whole red herring business, or when he introduces the film crew to Eugene's wife, he's like, and she's like, oh, they're here for the thing. And she kind of brushes off, meanwhile talking in graphic detail about the various other things that are going on. It's like, why are you brushing that thing off? It's only after you see the movie and you watch it again that you catch these little cues. And like you said, like getting her to do the fishing line thing, that's all about getting her to trust him. So when push comes to shove, he predicted she was going to do this shit. Everything she does, he kind of called her on. And he knew she was going to do it.
Every time Taylor talks about the one that she thinks is the survivor girl, she always says her name, and he will never say her name. He answers always in pronouns or like, well, the reason I chose who I chose.
Right.
Like, he is very deliberate with how he answers so that he's always honest, but he's not showing everything, just like a magician, like one of you just said, Yeah. It's that thing Chris Angel always does where he's like, that's fair, right? When we all know it's not fair,
The red herring's name is Kelly.
Kelly.
I just looked it up.
Yeah, so like she'll say Kelly over and over and he never does.
Yeah, and I love that shit. I love finding those little Easter eggs. Because you see it afterwards, and you're like, "Oh man, he totally planned this out." So, like when you were saying earlier, like, "Oh no, I totally believe that Taylor contacted him, but he manipulated events so she would contact him." I'm like, that actually makes sense. I don't know if I can ever be like, "Yes, that's how it is," unless I found like a deleted scene where it shows like them answering the Craigslist, because I am one of those kind of people. I'm like, I have to see it. I'm from Missouri. But I was like, no, that totally makes fucking sense. No, I can't think of it. Like, I said at the top that I love this movie because it doesn't exist without its meta quality. But talking it out and thinking about it, it's like the rules are important. But it's almost the idea of the deconstruction that drives the plot, not the deconstruction itself.
Okay.
Kind of like how Scream everyone makes a big deal like Scream is aware of slasher movies. No, Jamie Kennedy's character just won't shut the fuck up because no one fucks him. It's a pretty basic slasher plot. It's not that clever. But I think it would also be disingenuous of me to say that this is nothing but a deconstruction of the genre and it's almost the exercise itself is the point, not what the results are. Like, us talking about a slasher is what drives the plot, not what the slasher is. And that might be a little too abstract for me to make sense. Because I'm trying to articulate it in my head so I can say it. But I'm like, very quickly, it's not like he says, rule number 1 is you have to establish your anchor. And after we find out that he's not really Leslie Vernon, which if for a movie that plays it straight, like Mike Myers exists and Freddy Krueger exists as real people, they yada the fuck out of the whole fact up until the reveal that he's not really Leslie Vernon, that this kid apparently was hung and thrown off a waterfall and survived. And they never question it. Well, Jason Voorhees is a real guy. Mike Myers is a real guy. Freddy Krueger is a real guy who uses magic, like magician's talk, to make them seem supernatural. But hey, he survived getting thrown off a fucking waterfall. And I love that aspect of it. It plays it completely straight. I don't know what you guys think about that, though.
I mean, that's just small town America, right? Like, everybody knows that story about some kid no one actually met. And, like, we've all heard this story and we embellish it over the years and everyone just accepts it,
There's one instance during the actual massacre where the stoner kid, who actually, if I recall correctly, he's either Hispanic of some descent or he's just really olive complected. But he's one of the 2 stoner kids. The other one has a dumb haircut. And he goes, "Oh, man, it's Leslie Vernon. You know, the one with the dumb haircut. He's a little poof on his forehead."
Yeah.
Yep.
He reminded me of that old video game. It was a car game. It was a Demolition Derby car game, and I remember seeing the ads for it in the comic books. And the famous car was like the one with the insane clown on it, and that's what.
Oh God, I remember the Twisted Metal.
You know what I'm talking about? Thank God someone knows what I'm talking about. Because I referenced, they're like, what? But he referenced Leslie Vernon, and Taylor was like, no, this is Leslie Mancuso, and then it's never brought up again. I just love how straight they play this, and then when you stop and think about it, you're like, wait, do you really believe this is the guy who fell off a fucking waterfall? You do?
That's kind of great.
Okay. Oh God, it's amazing.
And I mean, like, Leslie could have even made fun of that, like, just the whole, like, you put so little thought into this, like, you're paying attention to everything, but you don't look at the most obvious shit ever.
When they talk about magicians and shit like that, like, there is so much sleight of hand going on in the movie. And that's one of them. You're too busy watching him kind of pre-cut the branch that you're not paying attention to the fact that he's anticipating you, even though his plan does not have them going upstairs to hide out. He anticipates them going upstairs to try to get out the window. Mm-hmm. And he shows you him pre-cutting, even though when he lays out his plan, they don't go upstairs, except to see the victims. Like, the sleight of hand in that in his walkthrough with Taylor and them is amazing, because he's telling them one thing and then doing something else as he's telling them.
Right.
And I love that aspect, because it isn't something that comes with the first view. You have to kind of watch it a few times. You're like, oh wait, shit, he totally called this. The one thing I wish, and I almost hope they do get around to making a sequel, although now it's like 14 years after the fact, so they've aged. They would have to do one like they did with Halloween, where it's like in real time. They never so say Taylor did contact Leslie, but although Leslie manipulated it, say that she did contact him. What fucking drove that? Like, I wrote in my notes, like, because Taylor, after she starts getting unsure in the library scene. Not enough to cut it off, but she gets unsure. She gets closer to pulling the plug, and she almost pulls the plug when she discovers he's Leslie Mancuso, not Leslie Vernon, not the real thing. Is the subtext. You aren't the real thing. You are the Crystal Pepsi of serial slasher killers, sir. And she finally takes a stand in the third act, but she is almost ridiculously naive up until this point. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, if you're the one to reach out, why? Why did you go forward with this? And that was kind of like when I was making my notes, talking about like the distance that a camera screen kind of comes to, and when they're killing the first couple in bed, and I think it's Todd, it says, "Holy shit, this is really happening," and it's like, why did Taylor agree to this? Was it personal ambition? Was it greed? Was it curiosity? They never really explore why she does this. Todd and Doug are presented as characters as they're the happy-go-lucky filmographers. And I think that's why I love Doug and Todd so much, because they're just fucking goofs. But Taylor as a character she's almost a cipher beyond her reaction. She's a very reactive character. And I would have loved, I hope in a sequel, if they did bring the whole crew back, because, you know, I think Dougie's still alive, and Taylor's still alive, and Doc Holleran. Like, why the fuck did you agree to this? And I find that fascinating. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that. Like, why would, like, if maybe something in the movie gave it away that I didn't see?
I think for them, it would be that curiosity, or at least for Taylor, that curiosity, and then possibly the notoriety of being able to capture that thing. Because the thing is, speaking as an historian, you always want to find out the information and find out. You want to be able to crack that puzzle. Like, is this real? Because even when they have that moment that where they kind of question, like, oh, this shit is really happening. This is going down. Yeah. There's that disbelief that a lot of this stuff took place or is taking place. Because you're kind of like, you guys can't really be going out here killing all these people. This can't be real.
Yeah.
And that realization that, oh my God, it actually is for real. And what I've seen from documentarians is it doesn't matter what's taking place, or even just photojournalists. It doesn't matter what's taking place. You keep that camera rolling because you need to catch whatever's there. I honestly think for her, it comes down to curiosity and trying to figure out what actually is taking place. If this is even real.
Mm-hmm. Because like that's the thing that always sticks in my. I wouldn't call it a plot hole because it's not. She's not the focus. She's the final girl, but it's in the title. It's about Leslie. But up until that realization of, oh shit, this is really happening, it's like she just kind of goes along with it. And, you know, you kind of get her at the beginning going, I want my own voice. Was it a little too Diane Sawyer? Which I'm like, that reference does not land anymore because no one knows who Diane Sawyer is. Holy shit, is that an old reference? You know, there's that aspect of I'm a journalist. So you saying even photojournalists, the whole point is keep the camera rolling. It's like, but photojournalists are typically assigned. She chose this. And I find that I would love, a part of me is like, that's fascinating. Like, Leslie's going, I made a choice. I want to be this killer. Right. Like, I want to be like, all right, you chose journalism and you chose this. Why? You know?
I wonder if it is kind of like Tragedy Girls. I don't know if you've seen that, Paul, but like,
no.
It's two girls, two high school age girls who are obsessed with social media, and basically they're running like this site where, how would you describe it, Don? Like they want like the latest news on serial killers, right?
Yeah, it was a blog or just in their Instagram posts and stuff like that, and they want to have exclusive access or control, not even just access, but exclusive control of the story of their own local serial killer. They ramp up what's taking place.
Yeah, so they start killing people so they get the first scoop. You know.
Was that on Hulu?
Was it on what?
It was on Hulu.
I remember because I remember seeing that. I'm like, oh, that sounds really good. But as everyone knows who has kids, you don't get a chance to watch things when you see it. You're like, oh, that looks good. Save it in my list that I'll never get to access. Because that sounds really familiar. Because I'm like,
Tragedy Girls is so much fun. You should definitely watch that.
Okay, but anyway, so you bring it up. Where were you going with that? I'm sorry, I interrupted.
So my point was maybe it's kind of like that, only the 2006 version. You know, like like she thinks I'm gonna get this exclusive thing, and when he does it, I'm gonna have evidence. You know, or I'm gonna have the story, not taking into account that you're a fucking accomplice now. You know?
Yes.
That's my biggest problem with this film. Like, yeah, sure, you're making this, but you're a fucking accomplice providing your own evidence. What are you doing?
You are evidence. Like, yeah, you are. If not, you are at best complicit, but you are definitely an accessory.
So yeah, I don't know. I find that very odd. But I was just thinking maybe that's kind of the same mind frame, only more 2006 than today.
Maybe. I mean, I was thinking about it because I was trying to. Don, you said you hadn't heard of this movie until like a few weeks ago. James, you've heard of it before. And I was like, yeah, no one really knows about this movie. And I was trying to think of why I know about it, because I didn't start reading Fango. Like, I knew Fangoria existed, but I didn't start reading it until 2010. And I had already seen it. I already owned it. I actually own it on Blu-ray and DVD because I love the film so much. I lost the DVD. I was like, fuck it, Blu-ray, and then I found my DVD. And I remember seeing it. The reason why I picked it up is because I was reading the website Bloody Disgusting, and it was like one of their 5-star flicks. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. And I was like looking at it. I was like, why does this exist? And I wish, because it came out, it was an indie film and no one has seen it. And it's like, this movie needs to be shouted from the rooftops. It's right up there with, in my view, Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. In terms of its self-awareness. Like, watching the college kids kill themselves all over their property. And I just love that kind of... I love it when they take a trope and they kind of twist it at an angle. I think that's also why I get irritated about Scream, because it doesn't. And it could. If you haven't noticed, I dislike Scream a lot.
We're actually doing Tucker versus Dale next week.
Oh, who's doing that?
John F.D. Taff.
Oh, cool. No, I was just watching that again the other day, and I'm like, I love this fucking movie. But Beyond the Mask, I it bugs me. If people who know what the movie is, they adore it. They love it for what it is. And I think part of the charm of it is that it exists as its own thing. Friday the 13th was a hit by itself. Nightmare on Elm Street was a hit by itself. Halloween was a hit by itself. But it didn't become part of the zeitgeist based on those single films. It became part of the zeitgeist through the culmination. Like, Nightmare on Elm Street didn't really become a huge dynamo until the fourth flick. And Friday the 13th has always seemed like the ugly stepcousin towards that one. Like, they're more gimmicky, like part 3 is 3D. But they became what they are because of the sequels and the series of diminishing returns those movies come. Whereas Behind the Mask exists as its own thing. So even if you really want a sequel, if you never got one, it tells its own whole story, and it can exist as its own thing. And so for those of us who know the film and love the film, it is like this like rare jewel that it doesn't get the spotlight it should have on it, but it has just enough that it's like, I have this treasure here. Behold,
Yeah, definitely. No, I love that. I actually don't want a sequel.
Really?
I like it exactly the way it is.
Yeah.
I love the end. And the reason that I don't want a sequel is the credits. Because when he rises, people who don't pay attention will think that this went supernatural when it did not.
No. Yeah, I agree. I agree completely.
And I feel like if you got a sequel, they would explain that, and I don't want them to. Because they did. They already explained it.
Yeah, they explained that he has flame retardant makeup on, and you know, you never
holding your breath and burying yourself for 3 days and all of that shit.
Yeah, he totally lays out how he could survive. I remember the first time I saw that, I was living in Maryland at the time, and it was my first year teaching, so I watched a lot of horror films because my first year teaching was an absolute horror show. And so I remember seeing that first scene. It was my three go-to movies that during that time period were 1408, The Mist, and this movie. And I remember the first time I watched it, The Mist is so good. And getting to the end, and I'm like, this was a really good flick. And I love this Talking Head song. Oh, look, we're watching this. And you know something's going to happen, but you don't know what. And then he just sits up, and that's when it goes black. I'm like, that's amazing.
I like that they don't show a kill. They don't go anywhere. They just
have him sit up. He's like, nope, I'm there.
And it's also the literal rise of Leslie Vernon.
Yes.
So, I don't know. I like that a lot. I think that's great. But no, I mean, as soon as you see that there's anything happening in the credits right there, you have to watch it. Like,
oh God,
you know, they're not just showing this guy working. You know,
everyone nowadays in 2020 waits for the post-credit sting because of the Marvel movies.
Yep.
But if you're a horror fan, nah, dude, you were waiting for stings long before that. You were waiting for stingers at the end of Jason Goes to Hell.
Mm-hmm.
With the Freddy Krueger love. You know, so like I love you saw the screen come on, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm watching. Something's gonna happen. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, I actually Marvel movies have ruined me to the point that I sit through the credits of any film now.
Yes.
Because I'm at the point where I'm like, if I made a film, I would do it.
Yeah.
Like, I would purposely put a scene just to do it. Like, it wouldn't even necessarily have anything to do with anything, you know?
The first one I remember was, I was going to say, the first one I remember was Ferris Bueller. You know, I sat there and watched it, and at the end, he's like, here? You're still here? Go home. Go home. And go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, yeah, if I made a film, it'd be the same thing. It would have nothing to do with the film. It'd be like the stinger at the end of the Avengers, where they're literally just sitting there eating. Like, what'd be the most boring, basic stinger you could do, and I would do that. Just be like, you expected something here. Fuck you.
Is that your favorite in any film? Like, I don't care if it's horror, just any.
My favorite stinger is the Ferris Bueller one. Because that was my favorite movie when I was growing up as a kid. Like, I didn't even know what the movie was called. You can ask my mom about this. Like, I was born in 1983. That came out in 1986.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I was 4, I had seen it because my mom was terrible at censoring movies for me, apparently.
Nice. Uh-huh.
Yes, but also I was terrified of Jeff Goldblum. Because
I still am. Yeah.
It's now my top 3 favorite movies of all time, but at the time I was terrified. But it was, I loved that's probably my go-to favorite stinger, just because, like, one, it's the perfect thing, and that should be the end of all stingers. I think all stingers from now on should just be, and they should just pull from that movie. They shouldn't recreate it. Just pull from Ferris Bueller's Day Off and put it at the end of every movie. Like, no, it's over. Oh.
My favorite would be at the end of Dodgeball. I love that one.
I haven't seen that movie since it came out. So what was that?
Dodgeball is one of my go-tos. It's one of my favorite films ever. And the bad guy, Ben Stiller, he's always like, so he's extremely overweight and he's eating out of like a gallon of ice cream, and he's like, oh yeah, you think it's great that I'm here? And then he like grabs his man boobs and he's like making them move around while he sings My Milkshake Brings All the Boys to the Yard.
Oh God.
Yeah, that's my favorite stinger.
I'd forgotten that.
Don, what about you?
This has to deal with the audience that was there. Because I love the Dodgeball one. But it has to be from Spider-Man Homecoming. Because everyone who was a Marvel fan, it was one of the screenings or whatever, the place was packed. And all these people, no one's getting up, no one's leaving. And at the very end of it is Captain America. It's like, hi, here's a word. Patience. You wait Maybe something happens. Maybe something doesn't. But, and he goes in this whole spiel about you just fucking waited here for nothing.
I've never seen Homecoming.
Oh my God.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, both of the ones are good. But it was just funny because everyone was sitting there and they weren't even mad about it. It was kind of like, that was kind of creative. You fucked us over because you knew we were going to wait. And it's like, yeah, I want to teach you about patience. Sometimes you get a reward. Sometimes you don't.
I'm the laziest comic book, and I guess that kind of goes back to kind of tie it in back to the horror movies. Like, I've been running the series. Like, I ran the series. I have the box set of all the films of Freddy Krueger, all the Nightmare on Elm Streets, and after a while, I can understand why at the time they came out, the villains became these like kind of folk heroes, because you just get burned out of the kill counts.
Okay.
And that's a terrible thing to say. Like, I remember reading somewhere, I think it was Joe Hill said, horror is empathy and terror is about concern of your own ass. And these movies are great at eliciting terror. I remember always feeling very uncomfortable in watching Nightmare on Elm Street. But you can just get burned out. In MCU movies, I kind of get the same way. I'm just like, I read the comics. I don't want to sit through this 15 minutes of credits because of all the CGI. So I'm the laziest comic book movie. I saw the X-Men movies, and I guess that teaches me. I punished myself by watching the X-Men movies. Because beyond Logan and Deadpool, those movies do not fucking hold up. Holy shit. I remember being
Is this the wrong time to go on a 20-minute rant defending The Last Stand? No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, fuck you, Brett Ratner fanboy.
I can resist.
Fuck out of here.
Oh, man. No, going back to what you were just saying about like kill count burnout. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the Saw films. I've talked about this a few times.
Really?
Yeah.
You are a rare breed, sir. I don't find too many of you.
And I'll go further than that. I love like Saw 5. So I mean, I'm talking deep Saw, right?
Oh wow.
But I mean, it there's the movie that doesn't exist, which we don't talk about, that other people call 3D. But so outside of that, like, I really like Saw movies, but like, I don't sit down and watch all. I was going to say the real number, and then I was like, do I delete Saw 3D from this? Anyway, I don't watch them all in a row,
That's the last one I saw. Saw 3D.
People who see that never like Saw again. And that's why it doesn't exist, and we don't talk about it. But I'll pull up Saw 5 and just watch Saw 5, or I'll pull up Saw 2 and just watch that, or Saw. I don't sit down and watch all of them because of that exact thing. Because if you just sat there and watched all of them, it's just people screaming for 10 hours. And you don't care anymore, But I do think that is like why we root for Jason or why we root for Freddy, because you do get burned out on it. And then you're like, yeah, kill those bitches. They caused this. They know better, It's also that you're the one that keeps showing up. So
yes. I mean, I kind of look at it, it's like, then I understand, and this is where we get into the marketing, the whole idea of it. Like, Friday the 13th exists because Sean S. Cunningham was trying to make money off the concept that Halloween developed.
Yep.
It was a cash grab. But it was actually a pretty cute movie. I actually enjoy the first Friday the 13th a lot.
Oh, yeah, me too.
So, like, the first of all those movies, the first Halloween, the first Nightmare on Elm Street, the first Friday the 13th, those are actually well-made slasher films. Where there's pathos, there's characterization, there's pacing. The formula isn't quite solid yet, that are unique to each film. And to a man, all of them, Craven, Carpenter, and Cunningham all said, there was no intention of making another one. But the studios came in and be like, are you fucking kidding me? Of course we're making another one. And then we kept showing up. Because, hey, why not see it? And again, that's kind of goes back to the beauty of Behind the Mask, because the few slashers that are by themselves
The few standalone, now you know why I called it that. Because there will never be a sequel to that book. The few standalone slasher films aren't memorable. Like, I've been watching them. They aren't memorable. Bloody Birthday, which I told you about, is the 3 kids who are born without empathy. That's at least unique, but it's not a very well-made film. The Burning is clever because of one scene where the killer kills a bunch of people on a pontoon boat, but the story is boring. Madman isn't very good. The Mutilator isn't very... Like, I've been watching all these, and I'm like, these aren't really well made. Like, the best you can say about a movie like Madman is that it has Galen Ross from Dawn of the Dead in it. And she isn't even under her real name. She's like Alexis Rubin or something like that.
Weird.
It is very weird, but I recognize her bug-ass eyes, and I'm like, who the fuck is that? And I looked it up. That's very mean, but true. I was like, where have I seen those bug eyes? And I went and looked at the trivia, but I'm like, it's one of those few standalone slasher films that are like, it exists as its own beautiful thing. If you want more, it gives you tastes of what could happen. But if you're like, this is good, like you say, James, you don't want a sequel, it leaves perfectly off. Let the legend take hold, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Whereas a movie like the movie Pieces, which I don't know if either of you've seen, it's a piece of shit.
I have not.
Oh, God. Again, I watch a lot of bad horror movies on Tubi, and Pieces is a movie on Tubi. That's the best thing you could say about it.
Somebody was able to pay their bills.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it, and even the other things that I like that are outside of the main slashers. I mean, even Candyman, I don't consider part of that group. Like, Candyman doesn't get brought up in the same way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I love Candyman. I love Hatchet. I don't know if you've watched the Hatchet.
Although that became a series too.
Exactly, and that's exactly where I was going with this. Oh. It really does do something that it becomes this series instead of the standalone, like you just said. And I hadn't really realized that I had that until now.
I mean, there are other good standalone slasher flicks. I love You're Next. I thought that was
yeah.
Now, I only just saw that last year because I got one of the few video stores in my area was closing down, so they were having a sale. So I went and dropped $100 and picked up 20 films.
Nice.
It was amazing. So I got You're Next, and I was like, I need to watch this. Another one is, have both of you seen May? Lucky McKee's movie May?
I have not.
That should be next on your itinerary. It is basically it's a female slasher, but it doesn't operate like a slasher. It's very psychological. If you've never seen Pieces, the connection wouldn't make sense. But basically, this person is obsessed with dolls and sewing, and she wants to make the perfect friend. And it's did you see The Woman? Jack Ketchum's The Woman?
No.
Okay. Because Angela Bettis plays the title character May. And she's kind of a creepy looking actress in and of itself, especially the way they do the makeup and the way they frame her.
Yeah, I just pulled it up on Google. Definitely.
Oh, it's I saw it in college because it came out in 2002, and that's the time I was in college. And it's probably one of the better ones. But Behind the Mask presents itself fully. I am going to talk about slashers. This is a slasher movie, and it sticks the landing. Whereas Your Next kind of plays off as just a horror movie. It's a slasher, but it's a group of killers. May is played more psychologically, but you like I said, you have movies like Madman and The Mutilator, and they're just not good. No, I'm still going through all my slasher movies, and I'm watching The Prowler, which was not scary. I still have never. Have you ever seen the original My Bloody Valentine?
No.
God, a long time ago.
I saw the remake, and I was like, this is a piece of shit. But Screen Gems remade a ton of movies in the early aughts, and they ruined kind of everything. I know Screen Gems did your beloved remake of Friday the 13th, or is it Platinum Dunes? Platinum Dunes. But they remade My Bloody Valentine on top of A Nightmare on Elm Street on top of a bunch of things. And I remember sitting there watching it going, this is a piece of shit. But I haven't seen the original. I might have to peek that out.
Now, you are a guy with an MA in English. You look at these very critically, look for the imagery, the metaphors, things like that. And there's this discussion about phallic and yonic imagery or symbolism within the hunt, or at least the seeking of victims and killing victims. I mean, like, is there any validity to that with films like this? Not just with this one, but with slasher films and horror films themselves.
Well, that went deeper than I expected. That's what she said. All right, so okay. The first thing I'll say is I feel like slashers in general are already phallic. It's usually a guy with an oversized knife or a really big machete, sticking it into people and pulling it in and out. Okay? That's
so you're trying to say this is about
there.
them overcompensating?
Abso-fucking-lutely. These incels who can't get laid go after people. And who do they always want? They always want a virgin, right? So see? Anyway, no, there's this line where Leslie is talking about how the survivor girl has to overcome everything, and she has to do that by finding a big, long, hard weapon. And he's making it very sexual and basically saying that she has to take hold of manhood and take it over and be the powerful one, which we see in Halloween 2018, as we talked about with Jerry Smith. Like, that's what Laurie Strode basically does. She becomes the aggressor.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's what it goes back to. I don't think it's necessarily penises and vaginas so much as power and vulnerability, which are also P's and V's, I might add. And,
I love the way he says it, though. He was like, she empowers herself, and he pauses with cock. Like, he emphasized, like, Nathan Basil, who plays the role, he hasn't, like, I think he just teaches acting now. He hasn't had many roles, and that was kind of like the end of his career, unless he comes back. But, like, he knocked that role out of the park. Not to get away from the whole talking of dicks and pussy, but because that's always important, and we should definitely talk more about dicks and pussy. But the way he would say a line, even if it's just a throwaway line, and he would say it in a way that he had such great chemistry with Angelina, I forget what her name is, her real name, the actress, like that. He would say things, and you would see an immediate kind of reaction from the actress, like when he says he empowers herself with cock, and you see her like literally stiffen in the interview chair because they're doing that one of those interview segments. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that was amazing. And plus, it was just a funny line the way he says it.
Oh, it absolutely is. But it also makes me wonder, we talked about whether the makers of this film are being satirical in parts or if things just worked out. And I feel like this is satirical. I feel like there's so much emphasis in psychology and lit crit and everything else about penises and vaginas that I feel like they were making fun of that. And they were saying, you guys think that everything's about sex, so here you go. Let's make it overly about sex. And then drill it home with the cock line.
Drill it home.
Thank you for noticing.
No problem.
At least there wasn't a killdozer in this one.
I definitely I like that kind of take on it. Like, it's so self-aware that it's aware of its own self-awareness of like the yonic imagery. Like, I've never thought it, and maybe I'm just being a lazy critic on this, but I've always been. I'll get to that. I never really took much. I'm like, when they mentioned the yonic, he's like, and she goes, yonic, and he goes, lady bits. I never thought of it in that kind of realm. I'm like, okay, if that is true, then the journey that Jamie Lee Curtis goes in the first Halloween, where she's literally running all around the house, that vaginal canal is like a duck's.
because it's like a maze. And I know scientifically accurate ducks. That was a long walk for that punchline, but thank you. But I do love the idea of it is so self-aware that it's like, all right, we're analyzing the fuck out of this genre, and from what we're doing, you can analyze it even more, so we're just going to make fun of it at this point.
Well, even taking the time to explain the term. Like,
oh, God, yes.
You know, that's what makes it a total satire for me. It's that, oh, you want to talk penises? Well, look at this over here. We have the opposite. Everyone knows what phallic is, but do you know this word? You know? Like, I don't know. Maybe it's not, but it feels that way to me.
It's an honest criticism. I mean, I'm an English teacher, but I'm very much a student-driven teacher. And this is getting a little bit too much into pedagogy for me to be comfortable, but whatever. I work with colleagues who tend to be older than me, although I'm 36, so I'm by far not the youngest person in my department. And they are very much like, you know, they are of the school of, we analyze the color of the curtains because Nathaniel Hawthorne intended it for something, blah, 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 blah. Whereas here I come and there's friction where it's like, let's appreciate the story. If there's something there, great, but we don't necessarily have to go digging for it. And I'm very much of that kind of critic. Like, we can play around. I can shovel enough bullshit to fertilize East Texas, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to. And I like the idea that this movie kind of plays with that idea. It's like, you could appreciate this just as a sort of horror comedy. It's not as overt as, say, Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, but it does play for laughs at times. Or you could analyze it. Or you could analyze the analysis. I like that aspect of it. Because, yeah, I'm with you. They get very lofty with, like, do you know what Yannick is? Let me explain this symbol to you. And I love that kind of take on it. It's like, because it doesn't really have anything to do with the plot. Again, it was like what I was saying earlier. He was telling them how he's doing one thing, whereas he's telling them he's doing the opposite thing. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't want them upstairs, as he's pre-cutting the branches.
Yep.
It's like, do you plan on them being upstairs? So,
well, if he does, he doesn't want them to go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, I think that sums up this whole film, though. It's never what it seems that it is. And I mean, even now, 14 years later, you know, you were talking about, maybe it was Don, said that this film looks like it was made recently, you know, like.
Yeah, it was Don, yeah.
It's amazing to me how well this held up, how it still hits tropes that we see a lot, but there's still so much more to it than that. It's not just bashing tropes, because that gets fucking old.
Oh, yeah.
It's like any good writing to me. You take the expectation and maybe you give it to the crowd, but then you kick it up a level, because it's that kick up that gets you where you're going. You can make a joke that's overly obvious and get a little laugh, or you can add that little extra twist to it and get the big laugh, you know? And I feel like horror is exactly the same way. If you're expecting the trope, whether we hand it to you or not, it's that extra kick in the stomach. That's what we're here for. And I don't think anybody's done it this well since. I mean, Tucker versus Dale, as you said, like, you get a lot of stuff, but I feel like it's different. It's not in the same vein. And so to me, it's a totally different thing. And we'll talk about it here next week with John F.D. Taft. But like, I don't feel like anybody's hit it the way Leslie Vernon hit it. And I'm waiting for somebody to take it to that next level, because if it is like the progression from Scream to this, I want to see what the progression from this to the next thing is.
I agree with that. I mean, I love, you were talking like in horror, there's one way of doing it. Behind the Mask, it shows the difference between, say, a jump scare and the building of tension. Both things will get a reaction of an audience. And depending on your type of audience, which one is going to be more satisfactory. The movie holds up because it balances both. I mean, we were talking about how it's aged. And it has aged incredibly well. There are two things that kind of date it. One, the Diane Sawyer reference. I don't think anyone nowadays beyond our age group and up would know who Diane Sawyer is. And the one jock pulls out a flip phone at one point. It's the only time a cell phone's used in the entire movie because it exists fine without it, without any kind of explanation of why a cell phone doesn't work. But he pulls out a phone and it's a flip phone. And that's but those are the only two things that really kind of date the movie. This movie could have been made 2 years ago, and people would believe it.
Well, I mean, even going back to what I said about Psycho, I feel kind of the same way. Like, Psycho is so universal time-wise that even though it's very much 60 years ago, it's also very much today.
Yeah.
And that's why we're still talking about it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that we would be talking about Friday the 13th or any of those if they didn't become a series, like you said.
Yeah.
So I kind of wonder, like what does it take for us to get to that level? Do you think it's the repetition of seeing Jason over and over again so we get to know him? Do you think it's something else? Like, what is it that makes Psycho what it is versus like these supposed throwaway slashers or just other horror movies that are relevant at the time, whatever they might be?
You know, I think Psycho had the benefit of, they killed Janet Leigh within the first 30 minutes, but also you had the marquee of a brand name director. Hitchcock, Kubrick, Spielberg, like these, you don't have many of those anymore. You don't have very many marquee directors anymore. You have them in genre films. Like, if I say Eli Roth, everyone in our room knows what we're talking about. But if you mentioned it at the Criterion Building, you might get someone who quickly walks the other direction. And most people just stare at you blankly. So I think that was it. I would be honestly, and I've dragged Scream enough, but I would be curious. Because the first one did make such a huge splash in '96, and we did have the burgeoning, ubiquitous nature of the internet at the time, although it was very much America Online.
That's its own horror story.
There was a commercial form of it, so it helped spread the blockbuster nature of the first Scream. Would it still be remembered today if there wasn't a Scream 2, 3, 4? 4 came out in 2011. And a potential Scream 5. But then again, you look at something like Candyman. Candyman still exists.
Mm-hmm. They
tapped into that whole Bloody Mary thing, and even though there were sequels, almost no one remembers the fucking sequels. Yep. I doubt Tony Todd remembers the fucking sequels at this point. But everyone knows Candyman. And I think the conceit with that is because it tapped into the whole Bloody Mary urban legend aspect. So I think with Psycho, it exists because they played with the formula of storytelling, not necessarily slashers because they didn't exist, although Peeping Tom existed at that point. They play with this formula of telling a story because the person we thought was the hero dies within 30 minutes. And then you're not really sure who the hero is. The only character we know consistently from beginning to end is Norman Bates, which is unnerving for an audience. And you had the marquee director of Hitchcock. Whereas
whoever he was, we might have heard of him. I don't know.
The guy, the tubby, bald British dude who was on TV at my grandma's house. But then you get into the 80s and the late 70s and early 80s, and I bet Carpenter's Halloween would be remembered as a stellar Carpenter movie, much like The Fog or Escape from New York is, but we wouldn't know who Michael Myers is without the series. And I think the same thing would be true with Friday the 13th. I think Wes Craven's Nightmare on Elm Street would last, but I don't know. Freddy Krueger was kind of like the superstar of the slasher killers. For the sheer fact that he was the only one who had his own 1-800 number. And he was in that fucking music video with Dokken. And,
he also had the only personality.
He was the only one who wasn't an unstoppable killing machine.
Jason was on Arsenio Hall.
Yes, I do remember that. But you know what? Freddy Krueger was on Joan Rivers. Okay. So
talk about outdated references. What did we just do?
Yeah. I'm a kid of the 80s, man.
Freddy Krueger almost got famous because of all the shit he did outside the movies. Like I said, he had a TV show, and he was in a record, and he was in a Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy Jeff video, which is even more dated. That's an even more obscure reference than the Dokken reference I just made. But he existed outside the movies. So, and again, like you said, he is the only one with personality. So I kind of wonder. I wonder if Scream would have existed without the series. Candyman existed, but I almost want to give it to Scream. I think Scream had a better chance of lasting than, say, Friday the 13th or Halloween. And I say that as between the three creators, Carpenter, Cunningham, and Craven, I'm a Carpenter man. Like, I love Carpenter's films above and beyond anything else. Whereas Craven I can take or leave. And Cunningham is an acknowledged hack. He doesn't make any bones about the fact that he's a hack.
Nope.
Which you gotta give them the honesty. So I don't know. Part of me thinks no, they wouldn't have existed without they wouldn't have existed without the kill count burnout.
You kept talking about video stores, and I have to think that played into it as well. It's, you go in, you had all these fucking options, and you're looking for like the coolest cover, and we were watching absolute shit because the cover was fucking amazing and had nothing to do with the film. But but I literally remember going, "Oh shit, Jason," and grabbing it. So like there's that as well. It's that familiarity, but it's also, what else was I gonna do all weekend?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, when I think of that time, like you were bringing that up, what I think of is the cover for a movie called Street Trash.
Oh, I gotta look this up.
Oh God, the cover is insane, and it's pretty gruesome. It's vaguely like the movie The Stuff, but
shit,
right? You saw it? It's great.
Yeah, that's great. Oh my God, I kind of want to hang this up in my house.
The movie is not nearly as good. I think it's on Shudder. Or The Video Dead. The Video Dead's another one. Although Video Dead I have a soft place in my heart for. But then there are those movies who are legitimately good who had creepy covers, like Fright Night. Fright Night had a legitimately great cover. And it was a legitimately great movie. Evil Ed scared the shit out of me as a kid. But it was only one. There was only one of it. There's a sequel to Fright Night, but no one remembers it because no one saw it. So I agree with that. Video stores definitely had a part because you had all the Nightmare on Elm Streets in a line facing out. You had all the Friday the 13th facing out. So yeah, it becomes very easy to just pick up one of those flicks and just keep going, as opposed to picking up Chud or Redneck Zombies.
Well, and we also didn't have the internet to talk about like random films we saw. Like you can't be like, who's seen Patches? So it was like, oh shit, man, did you see Jason? No, but I saw this Jason. And like, you might even think that you're talking about the same thing when you were talking about different films,
Very much so, yeah.
So, I mean, there's probably that community aspect to it as well.
Oh, very much so. Very much so. I remember that was the best thing about like when the internet became really ubiquitous. It's like, oh, suddenly there are more people I could talk. There are actually people I could talk horror movies with, because no one around me dug horror the way I did. So I think that's definitely a part of it. And that's, like I said, why I would almost give it to Scream, but I wouldn't give it to the other slashers, because Scream existed in the internet age. But then again, set it behind the mask, and it is almost virtually unknown.
The last thing I want to say is the VHS cover I remember the absolute most was Evil Dead 2. That one is like drilled into me.
See, I'm trying to picture that. And I can't. Oh, yes, with the skull with the eyes.
Yes. And
by Dawn.
To the point that I literally I keep a skull with googly eyes at my table when I'm at conventions because it's that ingrained in me. But it was always gone. It was always rented out. So I would always be like, what is this film? I need to see this. And yes, I did need to see this. But that's why, because I would always go look for it and it would be fucking rented out. And it took me like 6 tries to finally get to see it.
That is the great thing about the app culture now in terms of watching television, is because especially on like Tubi and Vudu and Shudder, is I try and find the movies I remember seeing in video stores. And I was too young to rent them, or I was too chicken shit because I didn't really get into horror until I was like 12. Mm-hmm. And that's when I dove in with both feet. Before then, I was terrified of that shit. But like literally, I'll go through late at night if I'm wide awake and the family's asleep. I'm like, all right, let's watch something, and I'll be like, okay, what do I remember? And I remember like the cover for House. I remember the cover for Street Trash.
House is the one with the ding dong, you're dead, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I loved that movie as a kid.
That movie's insane. And Vinegar, and when I go to conventions, like when I go to Scares at Care in Virginia, which is where I live, like when Vinegar Syndrome came last year, I was picking up like Frightmare and Mausoleum. Those movies are fucking awful. But I remembered the covers, and I was like, I have to own these because I've never seen them. I must own them, because I remembered them terrifying me walking through the aisles when I was a kid.
Don, what about you? Which ones were you like, oh my God, look at this cover, I gotta have this?
I can't recall. I mean, because it's hard to remember the video stores because I love them so much.
Yeah,
but there were places where I went where there was only Blockbuster, and you had to. And there were some towns where I lived where they had like the private. I'm sorry, not private. They had their own locally owned video store, and so you found like all these obscure movies and things like that. Some of them were good, some of them were complete shit. But I think the one that got me was probably one you mentioned, which was House, which that disembodied hand ringing the doorbell, and I was like, oh shit, I got to see this movie. And of course, the main character is played by the guy who was the greatest American hero. So that sucked me in. I was like, oh, I got to watch this. Then they had Bull from Night Court, which given another outdated reference.
Oh God!
And I just remember watching it several times. But that movie, or at least that box cover, definitely got me. Children of the Corn, I would say got me just because of like it wasn't anything that was really out there to suck you in, but it was just kind of the mystery behind, what's there. I thought it was a very simple way to do it. You got the scythe or whatever whatever farming tool that was being used in it, but I was sitting there like, okay, well, what's going to go on here? Exactly what's going to take place? Because one of the places that I hate the most are farms. So,
do you think you didn't like that movie? I grew up in Nebraska. We're all children of the corn, man.
But and I had to go and Google the cover just now, and now I'm looking at it again, and I didn't even realize that they had children hiding in the corn stalks.
Yep.
Really? I'm gonna have to look this up now. Hold on.
Yeah. Because I had always focused on the hand and the scythe. That was all I ever focused on, because I was like, oh, the cover's red and black, and I'm like, it's going to be a bloody movie. There's going to be some crazy stuff that takes place. But the creepiest thing was the fucking kid. The rest of the kids were fine. It was that one kid who named himself the preacher of the town or whatever the fuck he called himself.
I'm looking at the cover right now. I'm like, holy shit!
I never noticed.
The little eyes staring at you. So we've talked about a lot of slashers and a lot of different horror films and a lot of films in general. Actually, we've talked about a lot of stuff here today, but I love how it all wraps back into your book, and it comes out today, correct? That's right.
Yeah. Came out today because initially it was supposed to come out during the summer. I was actually going to go out, quote unquote, on tour. I was going to hit like 3 conventions, stuff like that. We were going to premiere it at one, and I was going to take it on the road. But with everything going down with the pandemic, it got pushed off, and they're like, well, how about we do it in September? I was like, that's great. because my birthday's in September. He was like, well, how about the 14th? I'm like, that's even better because that's my birthday. So
it's your birthday today. Happy birthday.
Hey, I can have a book come out on my birthday. That's a pretty good birthday present. So
no, that's pretty sweet. So everybody get him a birthday present and go download his book right now or buy a physical copy. Send him money. That's what I'm trying to say.
Send me lots of money. I mean, it's nice because I have a book coming out, and it comes out as a Nightworms package, too.
Oh, cool. Nice.
That was amazing when that worked out. So being a part of Nightworms again, because I was part of them before, and James, you've been a part of them. It's a nice little ride to be on.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
we love Sadie and Ashley.
Oh god, they those packages. Like I'm not subscribed because I could afford probably having a subscription, but as you know, being a parent, you never know where you're gonna need that extra money. Yep. So I buy packages when I can, and every single one I've ever bought has been just stunning. So being a part of it again was amazing. And having it come out, having the package come out the same month as my book actually comes out, I was like, oh, so it's like double promotion. But I felt guilty leading up to it because I don't know which one to tell people to order. Order the Nightworms package and get a signed book plate, get the other two books, get all the goodies that Nightworms are giving. Or you could order from Perpetual Motion Machine's website where you'll get the signed book plate, but you'll also get these slasher trading cards. Because they aren't that's not part of the Nightworms package. That's a separate thing. So it's like, go with God. Pick whichever one sounds cooler to you.
No, here's what you do. You do both.
Yeah, exactly.
They give the Nightworms one away if they want to, or keep that one, and then get all the extra stuff that comes with Perpetual Motion Machine.
See, John, I knew there was a reason why.
Keep both books.
Yeah.
Keep both books.
Keep both books. Maybe one is the loner when you're like, when you have a friend who needs a good book to read that's scary or insanely violent, and you go, here, you can borrow this one.
Exactly.
I like that idea. I like that.
Or if you have a friend who like bends the corners of the book, then you can be like, no, you can't have anything, you monster.
I agree with that.
All right, man. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. I've had an absolute blast. We got to go down some paths I wasn't expecting, and I've really enjoyed the hell out of it.
Now, thank you guys again so much for having me and being willing to talk about a movie no one has seen.
There are going to be people who see it after this one.
Hopefully that makes people go, I got to see this fucking movie. It's on Shudder.
That's right. Run out and see it right now. All right. So next week we will be back with John F.D. Taft talking about Tucker and Dale versus Evil. And until then, I am James Sabata.
And I am Don Guillory.
And we'll see you next week here at thenecronoma.com.